54, 55, 56, 57 has been postponed to March 1st. And that is the waterway project with the car wash and gas station. So if anybody's here for that case, it will be moved to March 1st. Okay, but by the way, if you want to give us your name and address, we will notify you for sure when that meeting will occur. If you want to sign up on the yellow sheet here. Well, that cleared out quite a bit. I should make more announcements like that. Welcome, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Plan Commission meeting for January 18th. First order of business tonight is we're going to take a roll to make sure we have enough people here. I'll call the roll. Commissioner Mitchell, he is absent. Commissioner Quain.
Here.
Commissioner Scott Berman.
Here.
Commissioner Villages is absent. Commissioner Paradise is absent. Commissioner Lex Potty is absent. Commissioner Jeff Berman.
Here.
Commissioner Dave Merrick.
Here.
And I'm here. We have 5 present, which constitutes a quorum, correct?
That's right.
Thank you, Counselor. First order of business is to ratify the minutes from the last meeting. Do I have a motion? Motion by Jeff Berman, Scott Berman seconds. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much. First case tonight is case 2017-51P, zoning chapter amendment, motor vehicle parking spaces in a B4 zoning district. Peter, the petitioner is Old Orchard, yes.
Right.
Yes. And would you give us your name and your relationship to the
Absolutely.
petitioner?
Apologies, though, for the hoarse voice. Sorry about that.
Quite all right.
Donna Pugh, I'm a partner with the law firm of Foley and Lardner on behalf of Westfield Old Orchard. It's a fairly straightforward matter. It's a request to adjust the required parking ratio. For a long time, we've felt that it was unduly restrictive. I know everyone's had the experience of trying to find parking in front of Maggiano's or some of the prime areas where everyone wants to park, but there's a lot of excess parking in the decks and on the west side.
We can't all park in front?
Yes, everyone wants to do exactly that. So, there have been over the years, and I'm trying to give you the short version, but there's been a lot of study into how we can enhance the site, for example, with increased ride sharing with Lyft and Uber and bicycles and, promoting the use of the CTA, et cetera. And all those things are working. Not only have we concluded that it's overly restrictive, but your independent consultant, Gewalt Hamilton, concurs with that. And so this is also very much in keeping, again, as you'll hear from Serge, but that with other Westfield malls around the country. We provided the data and the cities and everything to your staff who've independently looked into that. And what we're proposing and what they're supporting is very consistent with what's done with similar shopping centers around the country. Now, I wanted to just give you an example. So why would we be doing this now? We're not, there's not something on the books. What's happening is right now we're right at the bone. We have a small surplus of only 7 spaces. So let me just give you 2 examples. One is Apple. Everyone wants Apple to stay. Their lease is up, and so we're looking at another space where there's some changes to the space. Instead of a curve, we want to make it a square, and so we would be adding square footage. So we've had to really wring our hands and fret about, oh my gosh, we're going to need 3 more parking spaces. And each time we built all these new restaurants and we're reconfiguring spaces, we literally are so constrained about every single thing that we do. Oh, we can't touch that because we are going to have more parking. So finally, in all of our meetings and conversations, the village has been very interested in our plans and been keeping a lot of dialogue with us. And each time my client comes in an airplane and says, you're killing us with this parking ratio. So it was finally decided that the village would commission its own study and independently verify what we were saying, and they have done so. And I did want to give just one other example, which is Crate and Barrel, another very important tenant that it has 4 short-term parking spaces so people can come out and load their stuff into their car. And Pete was very helpful to us, so this isn't his fault, but if we were to say Crate and Barrel, then they could not count as required parking for the mall. And So that would have taken 4 spaces out of circulation when we only have a tiny surplus and we kind of need it for Apple and these other things. So Crate and Barrel is now ready to renew, and they said, look, this isn't working. We need it to say Crate and Barrel. So we haven't even approached Pete about this yet, but this is just another example that we want to be able to say to Crate and Barrel, no, fine, you can have 4 parking spaces, and then we're not going to sweat that we're so close to our requirement. It's just basically, it's all about flexibility. So we think our request is fair, it's well documented, and we think it's consistent with other similar shopping malls around the country. And I did want to have you hear from Westfield, Serge Kalimsky, which a few of you met and some of you weren't there. So this is his second time here, the mall manager as of a year and a half, 2 years ago. Serge, why don't you tell the need for this change? Sure.
Okay, well, excuse me, Serge, I'm going to swear you in since you're not an attorney.
Right.
Oh, sure.
Do you affirm that the testimony you give tonight is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth to help you?
I do.
And for the record, notice is in order, isn't it?
Notice is proper and correct.
Thank you.
Good evening, gentlemen. I'm Serge Klimsky, as Donna mentioned. You know, currently we have 7,662 parking spaces, which is a surplus of 7. And what Donna was getting at is, you know, sometimes a retailer like Crate and Barrel, it's not a parking spot really. It's more of, you know, what's that?
Convenience.
Yeah, convenience, being able to get the customer what they need. If it's a large package, right now their dock is on the other side of the building, so they literally have to take 3 employees, cart this, you know, couch or table, whatever it is, down a hallway, have the customer meet them on the other side by, I don't know if you guys are familiar, but by Zara or by Cheesecake Factory, because that's where the Crate and Barrel pickup zone is. If we can have 4 branded spaces, and this is just an example, for Crate and Barrel, they'd be able to do more business. They'd be able to, you know, stay in Skokie, and I think they're a really, really great brand to have at the shopping center. I mean, that's just one of many examples. I mean, what we're really talking about is a need to be able to be flexible with our planning, with our master planning for the property, to really get into the analysis of the economics of adding, you know, any type of uses to the property or things like that. And that's what we're really looking for. You know, in the short term, we'll be able to make, you know, minor changes like the Apple deal, as Donna mentioned. But for the future, we're really looking at expanding and making it a property that is contiguous with what the change is in retail. So, you know, one of the reasons too is the consistency with the ratio that we have across the portfolio. Many of our centers have already adopted a 4 per 1,000 square foot parking ratio, and we actually have an exclusive partnership with Uber nationally. So I was able to get a figure from them. They have increased their rides to and from Old Orchard by 14,000% in the last 4 years. They really asked me not to share the numbers, the actual numbers, but they're astronomical. So just with that, you know, it kind of helps the discussion on what we're trying to do here. You know, also as a result of the new bike path right by Old Orchard, I personally have seen all the bike racks way more filled than I have ever have before in the past couple of years, and I've been there since 2013. But what it all comes back down to is flexibility, the ability to master plan for the site without having this looming over us every single time, because we can really put all of our effort into creating the future for the property.
Okay. Any questions of the petitioner? Commissioner Quinn?
With this reduction in the requirement, looking to the future, do you imagine at some point there might be like a standalone building somewhere out where there's currently just a parking lot right now?
That's honestly, that's nothing that we haven't discussed something like that before. I think it's really for the buildings that are already in place, or you know, taking something away and adding you know, residential or a hotel at some point that will need some parking that's specific to that use. But to answer your question, it's not impossible. I don't think that's something that we're looking at right now.
Okay. Any other questions of the petitioner? Okay. Very good, Serge.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
We'll have the staff give us its report for the record.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to ask that the report be accepted into the record as written.
Your request is granted.
Thank you. And then I'd just like to highlight a few things. The mall has gone through numerous modifications over the years and redevelopments, and the current parking requirement was probably put in place sometime around '76 when there was a major mall change. And at that time, of course, the car was king, and everybody drove to the mall. There always was bus service there, but we have some pictures from the '70s showing the day after Thanksgiving where every single parking space was taken. But since then, there have been numerous garages built, the Bloomingdale's garage, the Macy's garage, and now the one along Skokie Boulevard. So there are numerous places to park, and I was there the day after Thanksgiving, and there was plenty of parking, even though I didn't park on the east side. I parked on the west side. But others who did come, our economic development director, he said he took an Uber when he couldn't find a spot where he wanted to be. So it's more a matter of convenience than a matter of availability. So we did look at it, and we have had discussions about this before, thinking that the parking requirement was excessive. And we agree with the petitioners, and we, as Donna indicated, we hired Gewalt Hamilton, which we trust, and they did a thorough study, and they also looked up, national statistics and everything, and came to the conclusion that the proposed ratio is correct. The only thing that we are differing on is that Westfield requested it be on gross leasable area, which is different than how we calculate it. In fact, we don't even want to calculate it the way we usually calculate it, which is on net square footage, and it's very difficult to do that. So every time a new use comes in, we'd have to look at it, we'd have to calculate the parking, we'd have to take out hallways and different things, and it makes it difficult for the shopping center and for us. And so what we would like to do is go by gross floor area. It makes it very simple, and we come up with a new definition of what gross is just for this land use. I should state that this also applies to the Village Crossing Shopping Center at Toohey and Carpenter Road. However, the Old Orchard would have a slightly lower parking ratio because they are served by numerous buses, and so we look at them as a transportation hub, which really would require a little bit of a benefit. So they're at 3.8 parking spaces per thousand, which is really a little lower than requested, but by going from net to gross, it balances out, and we feel that it's adequate parking, and we really don't see that there'll be any issues in the future.
Okay. Getting to the Gewalt Hamilton survey or analysis, what was the length of their survey?
Well, the petitioners provided some locations where they had different parking. They also used the Transportation Engineers Manual, which surveys thousands of locations, and they, factor in different uses at those centers. And so that's how transportation engineers do it, basically.
No, they didn't do an actual sampling at Old Orchard at any given time?
No, because we already have the figures. We already have gone through the site plan approval several years ago and had determined how many parking spaces are there, how many are needed, and we already know that there's excess at the location.
Okay. Any questions of staff? Commissioner Berman.
I don't disagree with the studies, and it sounds like the parking ratio makes sense. The question is about signage, identifying specific use parking. Crate and Barrel came up tonight, but I was going to ask the question anyway related to parking. We had some rules about that, about cross lateral parking from lot to lot, use to use, came up heavily in a Dempster discussion that we had when we were talking about Burger King, Dunkin' Donuts, Pizza Inn. I'm curious, do we have the same rule, are there different rules for Old Orchard? And can and should Old Orchard have different rules that has identifiable signage for different stores?
Well, the rules are exactly the same. However, that's for required parking. So if you have required parking for a site, you can only have so much that is set aside. If you have a single use, you could have up to, I think, 10% assigned parking. If it's a multi-tenant building or a multi-tenant use, you could have no assigned parking. However, that's, again, for required parking. Now that there'll be an excess of parking based on the change, those excess spaces can be used for different purposes. For instance, down at Village Crossing, there is now a whole area where, what's the car company, that electric cars?
Tesla.
Tesla has their own bank of charging stations. It's all excess parking, but they put in about 10 charging stations. So we have no problems with doing something like that. And with Tesla being a retailer up at the shopping center, it might be something that they would want also at some location.
They have an area where they display the cars.
That's only for their own cars.
Oh, for, okay.
Yeah. But, of course, we wouldn't want them in prime locations. We would want them to be somewhere else.
So, for example, at Village Crossing, where there are multiple uses and excess parking there also, we could see that repeat of signs throughout the center. Everybody, Chuck E. Cheese, Barnes and Noble, each of them could claim up so many spaces not to exceed that number that then are open to the public.
Could be. However, it's all subject to a review, and again, we would not want to see those prime spaces that all customers would want to have. I mean, I know at other locations and malls and other communities, they actually have premium parking, which they may rent, and we don't allow anything like that.
So we do allow signage and separately identifying things as long as that doesn't exceed that minimal number that we need for open parking. And
Yes.
when you say subject to review, each sign, each time a merchant claims spaces, that is subject to the staff review?
Yes.
Do they come, subject meaning that we can review it if we wish, or they must come each time and ask for that review?
They must come and ask for that review. We find it, and then we make them come in and review the signage, and we review the Tesla, because, well, Tesla had more than just signs. They had transformers and other equipment that goes with it. And so there's permits involved and different things.
So this couldn't be abused, in other words, because if Old Orchard, for example, were to then begin to assign 20 spaces per store and try to lock them all in closest to the building, we then, upon notice, would then say, wait a second, you might still have an excess number, but you've claimed all of the best spots.
I believe so. And certainly working with Old Orchard, that would not be a situation that we would expect.
They haven't done that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Is there anybody in the audience who has a question or a comment pertaining to this case? Not seeing any. Counselor, do you have any closing remarks?
No, I do not. I can't remember if you're recording or not. No, I do not. We really appreciate, really this has been a conversation, Pete, that's gone on a decade maybe. So we appreciate staff really was the one who proactively said, look, let's address this, let's do a study. So I know Stephen Floor, the head of real estate, couldn't be here tonight. His wife had severed her calf muscle. And he really wanted to be here, and thank you, because this is something very important to, not just to Westfield locally, but he gets a lot of grief about it nationally with Westfield, so he's very, very happy that you guys put that on the agenda, and we hope that you all approve it.
Okay, thank you.
Before you take your vote, could I just clarify? I think there was a question about how this applies to future. And we're looking at it as the makeup of the mall the way it is, sort of. There's two categories in the B4 district. There's the ones where the retail is less than 50%, and there's one where over 50%. In this case, they're over 50% retail, so we're looking at this shared parking. I know Serge brought up that, well, maybe in the future there could be hotels and residential. When that starts happening, then we have to look at it a little differently, and those uses might be looked at individually and the parking may be determined based on their individual uses. So just to keep that in mind, this is to look at this as a retail mall. It has entertainment, it has a whole mix of uses, it could have offices, but if we start seeing a change, then that would have to be reevaluated.
Okay.
And of course, we'd have to come before you at least for our site plan if we were going to add another building.
That's right.
Okay. Open for a motion. Commissioner Jeff Berman.
To accept the report as presented.
Okay.
Second?
Second. Mr. Scott Berman, thank you. Call for the vote. Commissioner Mitchell is absent. Commissioner Quinn.
Aye.
Commissioner Scott Berman.
Aye.
Commissioner Velazquez is absent. Commissioner Paradise is absent. Commissioner Luxpati is absent. Commissioner Jeff Berman.
Aye.
Commissioner David Merrick. And I'll vote aye. Motion passes.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
And this still has to go before the Board of Trustees for their final approval. And you'll be notified when that'll transpire. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Our next case is case 2017-58P, zoning chapter amendment for colleges and universities. And the petitioner is
Village.
the village. And was notice required for this?
Notices proper and correct.
Very good, thank you.
Okay. The village received a request from a private college to locate in our M1 industrial district. And in the past, we have never allowed universities in those districts, in the industrial districts, except for in the office research district, where over the years we've had several colleges. And so we took a look at this. There's a category called colleges and universities, technical trade and specialty schools. And so we do have specialty schools, there are technical trade schools that are in the industrial districts, but so far we haven't had any colleges. Staff looked at it, we reviewed it with the Traffic Engineering Division and other departments, and we really have no objections to it. The M1 district is very much like the Office Research District. There's large yard setbacks. The overall setup is more like a park-like setting than the M2 and M3, and we felt that the college could be a acceptable use in the district. We also looked at possibly changing trade technical schools to allow it, but we felt that those should be left as is. And as it is right now, colleges and universities are allowed as special uses in the R1, R2, R3, and R4 districts. They're permitted in the TX and CX districts. They're a special use in the B1 district and a permitted use in the B2, B3, B6, and we're recommending in the M1 and the OR district. So if they are allowed in the residential districts and they're allowed in the commercial districts, we felt that the M1 district would also be a suitable location for them. And we didn't think that there would really be any conflict between industrial uses and the colleges if they so located. They will still have to come in for a parking determination based on, we'll have to review the parking of any location they go into. So it's not just like they could move into any location.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
Peter,
yes.
could you give me an idea of what particular M1 area we're talking about visually, or
M1
trying to
is
imagine
the
where?
area south of Howard Street goes east-west.
Yeah.
So it's the area on the west side of the Edens Expressway and south of Howard Street. That's all
Gotcha.
M1 in that area. And you'll see that the lots are larger in that area.
Yeah, I see that,
And
yeah.
there are certain areas that go up along Frontage Road, north of Howard Street, that's also M1. So over by the Niles West High School.
Is this a college that already has a kind of a footprint in Illinois? Are they brand new to the area, or?
I couldn't
Without
tell you.
naming
It's-
them?
Again, it's a religious college,
Gotcha.
and they have a particular reason that they want it to be in that area, and we felt that it's an acceptable location for it.
I have 3 questions.
Yes.
One, is this the first time that we've separated colleges and universities from trade schools?
No, they've always been separate.
So then they have different classifications.
That's right.
Number 2, the rules that are written regarding the definitions of trade schools versus colleges seems to be quite important. It was important a few months ago when we were reviewing the kickboxing, I think it was kickboxing or some unusual place that decided it no longer was just an exercise facility, it was now a school, and we said that it wasn't. That is because our rules are, but I don't remember seeing the rules at that time. These rules are pages and pages of what defines a college, a university, a trade school, a driving school, and a kickboxing school.
Yes, they are. Yes, the legal department came up with a, possible language, and we reviewed it with the legal department and decided not to go with that, that we really want to keep trade schools separate from colleges and any other kind of recreational facility or something like that. So-
Okay. My third question is, some colleges and universities are not-for-profit, which importantly removes from the tax roll what was formerly industrial. That's a consideration that we are making site by site, use by use, or that is a decision we're making tonight by permitting suddenly the opening of the floodgates to colleges and universities where previously there was taxable land now to be non-taxed.
Well, we can't really distinguish between for-profit and nonprofit. If the use is acceptable in a district, I think we'd have a real issue trying to distinguish between a profit and nonprofit. We're
So-
looking at the overall land use and how they operate rather than whether it's taxable or not.
So a special use would not be needed then when they come again before us. So we are saying to Middle Skokie, where they were so aggrieved before when we permitted a not-for-profit school to come where previously there was taxable land by Rand McNally, we are saying to Middle Skokie, again with heavy industrial use, that we are permitting the floodgates to be open for the formerly industrial land to now be not-for-profit.
Well, it's actually in a different school district in a different area, but it possibly could. However, with the change in tax laws and things, most of those nonprofits have disappeared, and profit colleges have disappeared also. So there's a lot of them that we had in the past have gone. So
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, is there anyone in the audience who has a comment or a question on this case? Not seeing any?
I'm sorry, one more question. One more-
Berman?
So, when you answered the question, Bob's question about the M1 district we're talking about, you said west of the expressway near Howard. Is that the only M1 district that we have in the village?
it goes down Carpenter Road, down to where McDonald's is, and then goes across. A lot of that's being converted to commercial to B2, and then it goes to Central, and then goes back north again. So.
But we don't have another district over near Oakton and Lawndale.
No.
Those other districts are not this. It's
No.
only relative to that one district.
That's right.
And what school district is that?
It's the
Fairview?
Fairfield. Yeah, Fairview.
Okay, thanks.
72.
Fair,
72, I think it is.
okay.
Any other questions? Okay. Open for a motion.
Let's concur with staff.
Commissioner Jeff Berman, seconds, thank you. Call for the vote. Commissioner Quinn,
Aye.
Commissioner Scott Berman,
Aye.
Commissioner Jeff Berman,
Aye.
Commissioner Merrick,
Aye.
and I will vote aye. Motion passes. Okay. Again, this case will go before the Board of Trustees at a date sometime in the future. The Board of Trustees meet on the first and third Monday of every month. Okay, nothing before the board. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you for attending.